what do you think Nietzsche's overarching philosophical project is about?
Well, I think that's an excellent starting point. So Nietzsche noticed that, and getting interested in in philosophy, that human beings had believed that they discovered certain absolute truths in various areas, religious truths, metaphysical truths, logical and epistemological truths, and of course, moral truths. And Nietzsche, by training, he was a philologist. He studied classical languages, classical literatures, and so and he was an outstanding scholar. He was at the age of 24, he was offered a chair of classical philology at Basel University in Switzerland, even before he'd finished his PhD. So he was one of the leading
Wow.
scholars in this area. And through his knowledge of ancient cultures and ancient texts, Nietzsche noticed that human beings' ideas of what is true and what is good and what is beautiful changed over time. So our values, our ideas of what is true and what is morally good have changed through the centuries and through the millennia. And so this idea that there's one fixed truth that somehow we have discovered what's true in the area of metaphysics or in the area of epistemology, Nietzsche simply rejected that as a kind of hubris or as something completely misguided. So an important part of his project, and this really begins with the series of books that he started publishing around 1878 with Human All Too Human and its various sequels, was to take apart all the various fallacies and prejudices and misunderstandings that had accumulated. So there's definitely a skeptical element to Nietzsche's whole philosophical project, a skepticism of all these truths that human beings had come to very easily and very complacently believe over
Right.
time.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, so that's very interesting because, when you say, well, truth, what we consider truth, changes over time and is culturally conditioned. That's just that sounds like a truism to people now. Nowadays that's like the water that we swim in. But at the time, this was fairly revolutionary.
It was. Now, bear in mind that there was an important precursor in Nietzsche, and that was Hegel. It was really Hegel who introduced this whole idea of evolution into European thinking, European culture. Of course, Darwin came after Hegel. Darwin introduced the idea of evolution into biology, into the study of natural science. But so in this particular respect, Hegel is an important precursor because he, in his studies on the philosophy of history and religion and philosophy, he talks a lot about how ideas have changed from ancient times through medieval times into modern times. And so that was definitely one of the factors that influenced Nietzsche's thinking.
Okay. So, one of the things that Nietzsche is known for is his discussions of nihilism. Some people, um, you'll hear people describe Nietzsche as a nihilist. Nietzsche, I know, described himself at times as an immoralist. Um, so, when it comes to nihilism, um, how how do you think that's commonly understood, and how do you think what do you think Nietzsche's definition of that, and what kind of differences there were for Nietzsche?
Well, one common dictionary definition of nihilism is the view that life is essentially meaningless and valueless as
Right.
a result of losing some of these absolute truths that people had believed in previously. So
Hmm.
in the West, up until the beginning of the Renaissance, people basically took Christianity for granted. Christian faith, Christian dogmas, Christian morality. Really, during the Renaissance, that began to break down a little bit with more studies into classical philosophy, classical culture, and literature. And it accelerated during the period that we roughly call the Age of Reason, the Age of Enlightenment. But the 19th century, the century in which Nietzsche lived, was particularly a period of crisis because, for a variety of reasons, one, of course, was the study of philology, the study of ancient languages, which was Nietzsche's specialty, which revealed that some of the translations of the Bible that had hitherto been accepted were flawed or deficient or inaccurate in various ways. Of course, there was the Copernican revolution, which showed that the Earth is not the center of the universe. There was the Darwinian revolution, which showed that man does not have a privileged position in nature, that man is just an animal or had evolved out of other animal species. So, all these things that human beings had taken for granted, which up until then had given life a sense of meaning or a sense of value, religious truths, metaphysical truths, and the moral truths based upon them, were shown to have a false foundation. And I think the way Nietzsche viewed himself is he viewed himself as a nihilist, but also an anti-nihilist in different respects. On the one hand,
Okay.
he's attacking some of these eternal verities, some of these views of things that are immutably true and immutably certain. But at the same time, he's thinking if we want to create something new, if we want to create new values, if we want to create new virtues, first we have to tear down the old. First, we have to tear down the mistakes, the errors, the prejudices of the past, and then other men can build on the ruins, so to speak. So there's two aspects to Nietzsche's project. One is
Okay.
tearing down the errors of the past, and then the other, which he never really completed, but he showed some directions, is how to build upon the ruins of the past.
So we have to be nihilists before we can be anti-nihilists.
That's a very good way of putting it, yes.